So today we'll be taking up the content from radius and ulna, and last class we started with radius head, so we'll pick up from there itself. Radius is identified as the shortest bone out of the three bones of your arms, the humerus, ulna, and the radius. So it is the shortest of all three, and the nomenclature basically is because there is a turning movement about the capitulum of the humerus, which allows the bone to rotate relative to the more fixed ulna. So as we will see in the upcoming section of ulna, the rotation of or the hook sort of thing in the ulnar head is fixed with the humerus, and the entire rotation of your forearm happens through your ulna because of its location, because of its orientation, and because of how it is fitted with respect to both the bones, the humerus and the ulna. Okay, so therefore it becomes one of the important bone. Now we'll go with the few important landmarks of radius. Firstly is the radial head. Now you will see a very unique head of radius bone, which is quite flattened surface, which fits into the groove of the humerus bone in the in the distal end. So radial head is a round articular structure on the proximal end of the radius. It articulates through its cupped proximal surface, which is the articular fovea, the name, or the facet, with the humeral capitulum. Now if you remember, in the humerus bone, the capitulum here at the something like this structure of the humerus distal end. Now here was the radial end and here was the capitulum, this area. So here is where the radial head fits into, and also here the radial head fits into, let's say this head, and also it articulates with the radial notch of ulna. Now we'll see in the ulna this structure of ulnar head exists, something like a notch like structure, and this head basically fits into with the radial notch of ulna. Okay, so this is how the orientation gets into, and the three bones are fitted in all together. This being lock and key sort of structure, the ulnar notch and the humeral end, in the side of the ulnar groove, that side it's more lock and key structure, so therefore it's very much fitted, whereas this side of the radial side is more loose, and therefore it helps in more flexible rotation of your forearm. So this becomes very important. Okay, next is the radial neck. Radial neck, again, the portion beneath the radial head from where the radial head emerges, or that there's a curve like portion beneath that, there's a radial neck. It's a slender segment of the radius between the head and the radial tuberosity. Okay, one important thing as a landmark for the radius bone is the radial tuberosity, which is observed in the anterior view. Okay, which is observed in the anterior view, situated medially. Okay, if for example here we are referring to the right radius, so the radial tuberosity must be medially directed, as in it should be directed towards the body, towards the center of your body. Okay, or the inside of your body, not towards the lateral side, which is the outside pointing. Okay, so this becomes one of the important landmark to identify which side of radius bone it is. Is it the right or the left side? So if the radial tuberosity is pointing towards the inside, and the notch of the radial head is coming towards, not the notch, but that head is pointing towards the lateral side, then the orientation is right one. Okay, also with respect to the styloid process, as I was also referring in the previous class, when the styloid process is laterally located and your radial tuberosity is medially located, laterally मतलब बाहर की तरफ and medially मतलब towards your body, अंदर की तरफ, so that indicates that it is a right one. I mean, you have to see it, like if it's pointing towards the left side and if it's the radial notch is going this side, you know, and the tuberosity is coming on this part, like if we see from the posterior view, let's say this sets as a left side orientation of the radius bone, like this is pointing towards the inside and the styloid process is coming towards the lateral side, so this could be identified as a left one. So you have to see, like you have to see both the anterior and the posterior views, and then you have to make a decision. Okay, so next thing is the radial tuberosity, very important. It's a blunt, rugose, variably shaped structure on the anterior medial side. Okay, on the anterior medial side of the proximal radius. It marks the insertion of this muscle, a flexor, a weak, a medial rotator of the forearm, and a large muscle that underlies this muscle. So basically, radius bone, as mentioned in the introduction, it is facilitating the entire rotation of your forearm, also because of the support of two different muscles that are facilitating this movement. Fine. Next comes the shaft of the radius. Now, shaft of the radius is long, thin section between the radial tuberosity and the expanded distal end. The shaft is divided into three named surfaces by three borders or the margins: the anterior, lateral, and the posterior surfaces. So shaft, basically how you identify shaft is the region between your head towards your end. So this entire region is identified as the shaft of the bone. In this bone, we have different classifications. There is a nutrient foramen, and then we have, again, the oblique line, as I mentioned in my previous class, that these sharp lines over the bones are called as oblique lines. The nomenclature is same, but it could be added with the suffixes or the prefixes. Apart from that, the shaft is categorized into lateral surfaces, anterior borders, anterior surfaces, to give a more name about it. For example, this oblique line, this surface is more visible on the anterior side, and if you will see on the posterior side, the oblique line is not as a pointed area on the shaft. Okay, so that distinction could be easily made, like when you touch a bone, that pointed oblique lines could be easily marked using your thumb. So that is a clear distinction of the posterior and the anterior side. Okay, not going into detail with every surface of the shaft. Next is the interosseous border or the crest. It's a sharp medial edge of the radial shaft. It serves again as an attachment site for the fibrous membrane or the interosseous membrane, which divides the forearm into an anterior and a posterior compartment. These houses and isolates the flexor and extensor group of muscles which act across the wrist. Okay, so the attachment of the fibrous muscles throughout the border, and it also joins towards the wrist area, like here, and where your this styloid process basically could be observed in your wrist area. So it facilitates the movement of the bone, also it attaches with the wrist, so movement of the arms with respect to the movement of the wrist is therefore observed. Okay, this is about the major landmarks of the radius. So we are going into just the important ones. I mean, like there are different there are other different things, but we are not going into the advanced reading, so this is more than sufficient. Now see, from the lateral side, see how the styloid process appears. But when you touch the styloid process, basically it's a very sharp, like not a, not like a sharp object, but a very pointed one. Okay. Now coming on to the ulnar bone. See, now ulna is identified as the longest and the thinnest bone of your forearm. Forearm as in between your radius and your ulna, the ulna is the strongest and the longest bone, but of the three bones of your arm, the humerus is the longest and the strongest bone. It articulates proximally with the trochlea of the humerus. Okay, refer back to where the trochlea was. It was in the distal end on the ulnar side with the head of the radius. So both ways it articulates. The olecranon fossa, if you remember, the olecranon process of the ulna fits into the olecranon process of the humerus, and this ulnar notch, at the bottom of this ulnar notch here on the lateral border, we have the radial notch where the head of the radius bone fits into. It does not fits into like a lock and key structure, but yeah, it it sets into it, not fits into. Okay, now the most important thing here is the olecranon process. The olecranon process of the ulna is the most proximal part of the bone. It's a very massive and a blunt process. Again, attachment for the muscle, triceps brachii muscles, the primary extensor of the forearm, had its insertion on the tuberosity of this process. So now see, very important is, now in every bone we have seen the head going towards either the lateral side or the distal side, or inside or the outside. But here the orientation is in such a way that this hook like structure comes from the back of your this part remains as it is being fitted into your forearm. So this is going to be a part of your so basically when we see ulnar side, in like when you touch your elbow, this is the back of the olecranon process, which is round in structure, and this part fits into the trochlea of the humerus bone. Okay, and see here now, okay, no, I did it wrong. Here is how the head basically is set of the radius bone is set into. Okay, so this is how the three bones are oriented all together. Next, coming on to the other landmark is the trochlear notch. The trochlear notch of ulna articulates with the trochlear articular surface of the distal humerus. Okay, it's in the posterior surface probably. Of the ulna, it articulates with the trochlear articular surface of the distal humerus. In contrast to the more mobile radius, the rotatory motion is very restricted at the ulnar part of the elbow joint, sharply limiting the ulna in its ability to rotate around its local axis. So if you will see, only you can lift up the elbow or lift it down. You cannot move it sideways, or you cannot with respect to that joint, that elbow joint, you cannot rotate the head of the ulnar bone or the head of the ulna, because it's properly set into or fixed into like a lock and key structure with the distal end of humerus bone. Therefore, only at one axis you can rotate the ulna or with respect to that joint. Now the next important thing is the coronoid process, which is the anterior beak shaped projection at the base of the trochlear notch. Here, this is the coronoid process. If you will see in the lateral position, it's again a very sharp, a very a pointed end, a beak shaped sort of projection at the base of the trochlear notch. Then the ulnar tuberosity or the brachial tuberosity is a roughened depression immediately inferior to the coronoid process. This one. Now, instead of having a neck, there is a certain, just beneath the neck in the shaft area with respect to the oblique lines, there is a portion of ulnar tuberosity. Okay. Ulnar tuberosity is a roughened depression immediately inferior to the coronoid process, inferior as in below the coronoid process. It marks the insertion of the brachialius muscle, a flexor of the elbow, which originates from the anterior surface of the humerus bone. Right, so far I think it's easy. The radial notch is a small articular surface for the radius. It is located along the lateral margin. Now see, this is very important. It's not on the front or the posterior side, it's on the lateral side. So very important when you identify the right or the left orientation of the bone. This radial notch gives a clear-cut indication that it should be. Now see, this look is the medial look. It's not the look of the ulna when you see it from the front. That orientation has to be in a way that this notch is pointing towards you. And when it's pointing towards you, if the radial notch is on the lateral side, then that means it's correctly placed. Okay, and if it's if it's pointing towards lateral side, this is the orientation, then it points that it is the right side of the it's a right ulnar bone. Similarly, if you have a notch like structure and the radial notch is pointing this way laterally, this side, outside of your body from this direction, then understand that it's the left bone. I think very easy to understand once you see the bones by yourself. So this is another important landmark. Now next is the interosseous border. Again, the sharpest border of the ulna. It lies opposite the radius on the lateral aspect of the ulnar shaft between the anterior and the posterior surfaces. This one. Okay. Yeah, so this is about the radius and ulna. Any confusions, anything you want to ask regarding this, feel free. I have so far taken up the easy landmarks, because these are important, and these are important for in this stage to understand the orientation as well as how they're fixed into all together. So with this, we are ending up with the forearm bones. Let me know in case you have any confusion regarding this. Thank you.